Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to the second event in our Burma series. My name is Brian Kemmler. I'm the creator of Burma series, along with Google Ideas, who has generously sponsored this event. Today, we're lucky to have with us Dr. Robert H. Lieberman, a physicist from Cornell University, whose 50-year career has included the creation of 6 novels and almost as many films, the latest of which, they call it Myanmar, was screened the other night here at Google. Dr. Lieberman is going to be speaking with us today about contemporary Burma and answering questions. Please join with me to welcome Dr. Robert Lieberman.
I'm going to run this like I run my physics class, basically. I'm going to start assuming nothing and sort of, it's better to find out where students are and take them along as opposed to us. I'm not sure if how many of you have seen the film They Call It Myanmar? So some haven't. You can stream it now. It's on all major digital platforms, Netflix, iTunes. And we have a website, they call it Myanmar.com. And anyhow, so Brian wanted me to tell you about myself a little bit. So let me introduce myself. I have a number of careers. I teach physics at Cornell. I've been on the faculty there for about 30 years. I've been writing novels for even longer than that, and short stories, and I make movies, because we're really in the post-literate generation. So I've done fiction films, I've done a comedy called Green Lights, and I've done a film in Ethiopia during the famine, various films. Anyhow, I'd like to talk to you about Burma today, and I have some notes, but I probably, knowing myself, won't use them. I would like to look at Burma as a Martian would look at it, or better yet, I'd like to use Google Earth and sort of zoom in on Burma. And if you do that and you're sort of looking at Southeast Asia, if you look at the countries surrounding Burma, it's kind of interesting because none of them really are a beacon of democracy. There's Vietnam. If you talk out against the government, you're in trouble. Laos is a communist country. I just got back from Cambodia. Hun Sen, who's the prime minister, was put in place by the Vietnamese after the Pol Pot slaughter of 3 million people. Thailand, although it's nominally a democracy, say something bad about the king. And somebody wrote a novel mentioning something about the king they didn't like. They threw him in jail. There's not and corruption is rampant in all of these countries. So that's kind of the setting. Burma is different in many respects. Burma is kind of a unique country, and I find it very different from the rest of Southeast Asia. And if you look at Burma from above, you start if you start in the north, you're in the foothills of the Himalayas, and it's snow-covered. You start moving down south, and you hit jungle. Then you hit sort of the arid lands, and finally, you're in the delta, the rice-growing area, which is the lowlands. This is a very, very rich country. It has enormous gas reserves, which, in fact, are being tapped. They're offshore wells. They're selling to all the neighboring countries. So they have gas, oil, gems, rubies, jade, lots of other minerals. They have teak forests, and they have agriculture. Burma at one point was really one of the richest countries in Southeast Asia. It was a big exporter of rice. It had the best universities. It was sort of a shining example, and 50 years of military rule have caused it just to tumble to the bottom. If there's a list of countries and the poorest countries, it's down there near Egypt somewhere. So I'd like to talk about Burma it's very hard to do. Frankly, this is very difficult for me because of the complexities of this country. It's a country of 130 plus languages. There are 9 major ethnic groups, but really those break up into subgroups. The primary religion, I think 85% of the population are Buddhists. I'm an electrical engineer. I think we just got feedback. But there are Christians, there are animists. I may show you the animists, and there are Muslims. And so this is an incredibly diverse country. And I don't know really what to do in terms of presenting the country to you because there are two complete visions. They're the optimists and they're the skeptics. And I don't know where the truth lies in the realm of this, and I don't know where the country is going, frankly. And anybody who tells you they know is probably lying. This is a country of 60 million people. And the question, of course, is why when I did this film, there was really a high level of fear. People were afraid to talk. They were terrified, beatings, torture, imprisonment. I have one guy who is one of the narrators in the film, and he talks about what solitary confinement is, or was. It was essentially, they put you into a concrete tube, all right? And the tube is so small that you couldn't stretch out, you couldn't stand up, and they close the end. That's solitary confinement. And I think I could do like about a minute and a half. And so this gives you an idea of what they were capable of. He mentions they put, a bag over his head with hungry mice in it, and the mice were trying to bite him, and he had to bite the mice. It's really Orwellian, which is kind of interesting because George Orwell spent time in Burma. So there's this sort of the before and after. I've been there repeatedly, and I was there for the release of political prisoners, and there was a massive release, but there still are political prisoners in jail. And they're not political prisoners because they are in for criminal violations. And, it's very hard to separate, those criminal charges were used essentially for political reasons. The country's changing, and the big question is, I think, and by the way, feel free to interrupt and ask questions. In fact, I prefer that. Why did this country change? You're aware that Aung San Suu Kyi was in 15 years of house arrest, and suddenly she's released. And, why did this happen? Well, I think it happened because of a number of reasons. I think it's economic. I think the military was interested in doing business with the West. And I think the West was dying to do business with Burma. Before, Burma's main trading partner was China, also Thailand and India. But the main, Burma has a 1,200-mile border with China. And so Western companies have been essentially drooling now, trying to get in. They've got their sights set on 60 million people who are going to buy, toothpaste and television sets and computers. I think also the Burmese military was nervous about the Chinese influence. I think also that the generals wanted to be free to travel, and I think the generals wanted to send their kids to Cornell. So it's a combination of all these factors that caused essentially, the opening up. And when I was there in the beginning, there was essentially one internet portal, and it could be pulled at any time. I couldn't get onto the Cornell server to get my email. Interestingly enough, Google Mail worked, Gmail worked. I don't know why, it was really an exception. And if you wanted to go to an internet cafe, if you were Burmese, you had to register, you had to give them your home address, the name of your school, the name of your teacher. But what's interesting is that, and there were walls everywhere, but the kids understood about proxy servers. And so they were downloading, country and Western music. In other words, the wall was porous, information was coming in. So this is not North Korea. This is, somewhere between the West and somewhere between North Korea, potentially. So there was internet, and of course now it's really opening up. So there's these two views, by the way, of where is the country going? Is it moving to democracy, or is it essentially still controlled by the military? Well, there was a draft constitution that was rammed through at the time of Nargis, the cyclone that hit, and 150,000 people were killed. And the draft constitution reserved 25% of the seats for the military. In addition to that, the USDA, which is not the United States Department of Agriculture, but actually a political party, many of those people are also former military. So the parliament is very heavily weighted towards the military. And Suu Kyi, there was an election now, a by-election. She only won in a landslide, 7% of the seats. And the question really is, can Aung San Suu Kyi, affect change? The skeptics feel like the military is still in control. The optimists feel like, they're on the cusp of major democracy. Suu Kyi cannot become president because, first of all, if you or any relative have a British passport, then you can't run for the presidency. So there's a big election coming in 2015, but the real question is, can Aung San Suu Kyi run for that president? I assume you all know who Aung San Suu Kyi is. You do, okay. She's one of the narrators of our film, and I keep running into her. There was a film festival in Yangon, and I ran into her, and I always say, "Hi, do you remember me?" And she says, "Yes." And then I ran into her in the plaza. They were giving an award to her, and I said, "Hi, how are you?" And I think she's at this point now where she thinks, I'm stalking her. But you have to admire the woman. But there are people who really don't like Suu Kyi. And there are American scholars. I showed this film at a meeting of Burmese scholars, and there were some very upset people. And they're upset because they feel that Suu Kyi is sort of stealing the show, that, she's getting all these awards. She went to Bangkok before the president Thein Sein went, that he had to cancel his trip. She's, in the United States. She's at the UN. And on the other hand, you have to really admire this woman. She gave up her family. Her husband she was on house arrest. Her husband was dying, and she had to make a choice. Was she going to leave the country and see her husband? Or, once she left, she could never go back. And, does she stay? Does she go? And of course, she stayed. She also gave up her children, essentially, at a very tender age. So this woman has made enormous sacrifices. And when you get to meet her, when I filmed her, she had just been released. Our film was just about finished, and I was furious at my editor because he was going so slow. We were working 2 years on the editing of this film, and I've never worked that long on a film. And I was ready to strangle David Cossack, our editor, and fortunately I didn't, because she was released, and I flew back, and I had a rare chance to sit with her and interview her. And I was determined not to fawn over her, because journalists in general tend to fawn over her. And so I didn't fawn. But I went back later and I looked at the rushes, and then I started fawning. This woman is very, very smart. She, unlike most politicians, if you interview George Bush and you ask him A, he'll answer with Z, his prepared thing. It doesn't matter if it answers the question or not. Suu Kyi is very, very smart. And she's always listening. And I think I surprised her a bit, because I asked her questions that she didn't expect, because I knew what we needed. So I started off, for instance, saying, tell me a little bit about Burma. And she said, what? Yeah, I said, tell me about the country. I said, I know you can't do that in 10 minutes. She says, I can't do that in 10 hours. Well, I said, tell me about the diversity of the country. Tell me about, and so actually I knew where we were going, and fortunately we were able to cut her in. It almost looks like, we shot her and then we shot the film around her, and of course that's not the case. But I think you have to be the judge. She integrates into the film. Anyhow, she is very impressive. She's super smart and she's super articulate. And so I find it hard to dump on her, frankly. But there are real issues in Burma. And the issues are the minority issues. I don't know if you're following the news. There's a war going on with the Kachin in the northwest. It's a fighting war. The president has called for a ceasefire and said they will not attack anymore. In the meanwhile, gunships are going in, and attacking the Kachin. And so it shows you the military's running the show, not the president. There has been a major problem with the Rohingya in the Rakhine state, and the Rakhine state is sort of over here. The Kachin are up there, and the Rakhine are somewhere over there. And in the Rakhine state, there's a minority called the Rohingya, and they are Muslims. And a Burmese woman was raped by 6 Muslims, and this started a massive retaliation on both sides. And the net result has been tens of thousands of Rohingya displaced. The Burmese, interestingly enough, do not think of the Rohingya as Burmese or Myanmar residents. They originally came from Bangladesh, and some of them have been there for hundreds of years. They are actually stateless and not recognized. They cannot send their children to school. They can't own land. And here's where we start to come into one of the real problems. A friend of mine who runs an NGO, or did a big one in Burma, said that Suu Kyi had a choice, and she could have either been sort of a moral force like Bishop Tutu or a politician. And she chose to become a politician. And as a result of that, you know, you get dirty when you're a politician and you're making compromises. Suu Kyi has asked about the Rohingya, and she has really not commented on them at all. Here is a woman who has really fought for human rights, but has steered clear to this because it's a hot potato. The Burmese, there's this enormous hatred for the Rohingya. And this is a case where, you know, she wants to run for office and run for president potentially. And if she makes a statement about the Rohingya, you know, she's going to lose a part of the electorate. So this is, you know, she could have stayed above the fray, and she decided to get into it. And I think now, you know, you're seeing sort of the fissures that are occurring. The minority, there have been a number of minority wars. The longest civil war on earth was with the Karen, which are a Christian group, essentially in the eastern part of Burma. And there is a ceasefire now. But in 1949, General Aung San, the father of Aung San Suu Kyi, managed to pull most of the minorities together at this Palang conference. And they agreed that they would work for independence from the Brits. And later on, you know, they would form a federation. The question really is now whether Aung San Suu Kyi can hold this country together with its 130 languages. It's amazing. If you go up, you know, towards, you know, the Golden Triangle in the north, I have to just check my directions here, in the northeast, you can be dealing with a tribal group and go over the hill and they speak a totally different language. They can't even speak to one another. How do you hold a country like this together is probably the big question. When you speak about the military, by the way, the tendency is to think of it as being monolithic, but the truth of the matter is, it is not monolithic, that there are some very progressive generals. So there are fissures within, you know, within the military also. So although the military does control things, it is not a single body. And one of the problems, of course, is with the opening up is essentially resources. The resources are controlled by the military and by their cronies. And one wonders what's going to happen in the future. In other words, if you owned all these resources or you had control, would you be prepared to give it up? And I think I know the answer to that. Yes, a good question. I think you're talking about the cyclone Nargis that hit in 2008, right? What effect did that have on the country opening up? I don't know, but I heard that this is hearsay, that Thein Sein, who became president, was down there at the time. And, you know, people say for him it was life-changing, seeing the situation where 150,000 people died. At the time of the cyclone, the military would not let in relief supplies, which were right there essentially in Thailand. And the United States wanted to offload ships and they wouldn't let anybody in. I don't know. The military is not transparent. You just don't know what they're thinking. They do not share any information whatsoever. So a lot of what goes on is really conjecture about what, you know, where their heads are at.
Do these state boundaries correspond to the ancient kingdoms?
Oh my God, that's a hard question. Because there were ancient kingdoms. There was one kingdom that went not just here, but it went all the way to Ayutthaya in Thailand. I think that actually this boundary is, you know, and any historian can correct me, you know, it is not Iraq that was put together essentially by the British. I think these are sort of natural boundaries. Any other questions? None? Yes. You'll have to walk. Good.
So I watched the film the other day, and it was amazing. I know that some people's faces were blurred out because of concerns for their safety, but other people's weren't. So I was just wondering.
Well, the ones that weren't blurred out are all now in jail or dead. No, I'm joking. Well, I blurred out the ones that I thought were at risk. For instance, people on the street, if you just shoot them, it's fine. Children are basically innocent. You know, when I've done films before, I like to have, stars, as I call them. In other words, I wanted to, follow a family, or I couldn't follow a family because whoever I followed would end up being arrested. So this was a very hard film to do. In other words, how do you do a film and not have stars in it? And what we decided is that the country was the star, basically. And I was very, very worried about the people who worked with me, who helped me. You saw in the film I got in trouble in a number of cases, and I was worried about the Burmese who were actually working with me and helping me. I was teaching film there. I was working with young film directors, and when I would go to film, I would make it a point of always asking them to disappear, and then meet them later. I was standing on the street. I like to shoot sort of crowds coming at me, so I wanted people ebbing around me. So I planted myself on a busy street and started shooting, and then some woman passed me and tapped me 3 times on the shoulder and disappeared. And then I knew I was in trouble, so I quickly wrapped up and just took off. Nowadays, you can go in and you can film. Crews are going in, but at that time, I got in trouble for filming vegetables. I mean, it's bizarre. I got in trouble for filming the National Library, and as you see in the film, this guy keeps asking me to identify myself, and he wanted to know my name and have my name come. What's your name? What's your name? He kept going, and I finally told him my name. It's Kjell Frikholm, and I come from Stockholm, Sweden, and I'm staying in the Parkview Summit, which was the other end of town, and I took off. So I think they're still looking for Kjell Frikholm. I think the big question is, what's the future of the country? Now, where is it going to go? Is consumerism going to take off? Are these people going to lose their culture? Is it going to become sort of Bangkok? Or is there really a sense of culture and history where they can preserve all that? Yes, question?
Would you be safe going back to Myanmar to do more?
Would I be safe going back? I don't know. I tried to show the film at the American Center, and the Americans did not want to show it. They were very nervous, and this is after the opening up. So I showed it at the British Council, which is part of the British Embassy, and I showed it one night, and the place was packed with Burmese. And I left the next morning at 6 a.m., and I haven't been back. So I can't answer that question. But I did meet Tencent's personal representative in the United States, and I gave him a DVD, and I didn't even charge him, the $29.95. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Could you imagine updating the movie? Would that make any sense?
Yeah, updating. I've thought about it. Are you willing to fund it?
Google will.
Google will fund it. I'm headed to North Korea. That's my next film. Seriously, if I could do that, yeah. I did the second most isolated country, and I think that, there's a need to have some sort of perspective on the situation in North Korea. It's gotten a little hysterical, as you're probably aware. And so I feel like, that would be a neat place to go. There are real environmental problems that exist in Burma. First of all, the timber is being cut. The teak, these are the last of the great teak forests, and they're being cut down, and it's not sustainable, and the logging is illegal. Inlay Lake, you'll see this beautiful lake in the movie, and they grow tomatoes on it. They have floating vegetable gardens. Essentially, the detritus washes down from the mountains, and it floats, and they have, tomato plants, and you get to them with a boat, and you can work on them. The trouble, it's all beautiful, but they're using pesticides, and the lake is, seriously polluted. So that's one environmental concern. There's a big project in the works. There is a Thai-Italian company that is prepared to develop Dawei. It is going to be a development which is 4 times the size of Manhattan. It's petrochemical. There are going to be roads linking Dawei with Thailand. The Chinese are building a railroad which will go from Dawei up into Yunnan. Dawei is situated in such a place where boats coming can avoid the Straits of Malacca. It's a fast run to China. And so, you know, why are they doing this? Why are the Thais involved building Dawei? Well, because of pollution controls in Thailand. There are really, they can get away with much more than they could in Thailand. And if you've been in Thailand, then you understand, been in Bangkok and know what the pollution is like there, you can see that this is just a disaster in the making. The Chinese are building dams there was a big project, the Mitsona Dam, which was going to be built by the Chinese, and it has been put on hold, or I don't know if it's been canceled, but there are other dams going in. There's been really, you know, popular uprising against these dams. You know, what's the future of the country? Well, the country really needs experts, and not just Western experts, but it needs Burmese who know what's going on and can speak the language. And there are huge Burmese communities here in the United States. The people there are educated. They know banking, you know, they know medicine, they know, you know, but the question is, will they come back? You know, the military has a get out of jail for free card, but the dissidents don't. And the dissidents who've lived here in the United States and the Burmese who have fled here for asylum, they have families, they have children, they have houses and cars, the kids go to school. You know, are they prepared to give up that in return? So that's a big question mark. The whole country really, as I see it, is a big question mark. I'd like to show you some outtakes, just you know, which didn't make it into the film. If you decide to go during the rainy season, this is what it looks like. When it rains in Burma, it pours, literally. This is just an ordinary rainfall. And the rainy season runs from essentially, you know, I think it starts in June and runs through up to the fall. Well, I think you get the idea. We have, you want to go to Orphanages? All right, so where are we going? Tell me. You're my driver today, huh? I have a high-class driver.
Yeah, we are heading to the outskirts of Rangoon, south of Rangoon, the city called Chao Dan. Chao Dan is a southern district of the Rangoon that is also ravaged by the storm, Cyclone Nagis, that is area. But our idea is to go to the orphanage. This orphanage is run by a Buddhist monk, and they told me that they have 300 orphanages there.
This is really uncut footage in a sense. It's not polished or...
Some are from the southern Shan state, some are from the Kachin state, some are Karen state. They have been orphaned by various reasons because of their mothers have been died, or they have been starved, or they have nobody to care for them.
Mostly they have battles in the borderline area. That's one of the reasons that they become an orphanage.
Are the mothers killed too?
Some mothers left, only the father passed away. Or both, like both were gone. Oh, she go excursion, and then when he saw any orphanage, just pick it up, just bring it back.
We hire some of the landowner to get this land to plow by his students.
So they, in other words, they raise their own food.
Yeah. That's right. Right. Sometimes some of the foods have been donated by the local community there, but it is not enough. For that, a lot of children, you need some donations from local community as well as from foreign countries. So now, some of the boys, orphans and children are working in the fields to get their food. So they have go into the plantation like rice plantation and bean plantation. They are working in the field now. And some are working repairing of the monastery, like painting the wall and repair some furniture like that.
Oh, in the morning time you clean, have to go to the paddy field. 6 o'clock wake up, 5, 6 o'clock wake up.
I liaise between donors and the Buddhist monks, and whenever, especially from the some Americans get contact with the monastery, they ask me what sort of items they are most needed. Buddhist monk has hired the land, plot of land to plow for their food. So they have to hire them. So the first thing is that he need money to buy all of the land.
ကလေးဘုန်းကြီးဒီနေ့အားလုံး280ရှိတယ်280ရှိတယ်ဘုန်းတို့ဒီနေ့ထဲမှာအားလုံးဘုန်းမွေးမှာတော့900ထီမွေးမှာဒါပေမဲ့မနစ်ကဆိုင်ကလုံးမုန်တိုင်းကြောင့်ဘုန်းကျောင်းနေပျက်စီးသွားတဲ့ကြောင့်ကျောင်းကိုပြန်ပြုပြင်ရတဲ့အတွက်ကြောင့်300ကျော်တော့ကုန်သွားတယ်အဲဒီကုန်သွားတဲ့ကြောင့်ကလေးတွေအတွက်ကိုဘုန်းကအရန်အခက်ခဲတွေ့လို့ဒီကလေးတွေအတွက်ကိုဘုန်းကထပ်ပြီးတော့မခေါ်နိုင်ဘူးပေါ့ဒီနေ့မှထပ်ပြီးတော့အစ်စ်တွေထပ်ခေါ်မယ်အားလုံးကလေးကြီးပဲ900ပြည့်အောင်ထားမှာ900ပြည့်သွားလို့ရှိရင်တော့ဒီကြောင်ရက်ပြီးတော့နောက်အစ်စ်လက်မခံတော့ဘူးပေါ့900
How old is she?
12.
12. And how long has she been living here?
ဒီကိုရောက်တာဘယ်လောက်3 နှစ် 3 years.
How old is he?
ဘုံအသက်ဘယ်နှစ်ရှိလဲ12 13 9 နှစ်ရှိပြီ9 years old 10 years okay 10 years or 8 years old I said where's the mother and father in the village
I see. So they were too poor to keep her?
နေရပြောလားဘာတွေလုပ်ရ
And is he studying to be a monk or what?
ဘုံဒီမှာကိုရင်လုပ်ချင်ကိုရင်လေးကဘုန်းကြီးလုပ်ချင်လို့လားဒါမှစတင်ချင်လို့လားစတင် I want to learn
Why?
ဘာလို့လဲတဲ့ကိုရင်လေးဘာလို့စတင်ချင်တာလဲတဲ့စာတတ်ချင် I want to be educated
So one of the themes that you keep running into, of course, is education, and the educational system was wrecked. Originally, Burma had the top universities in Southeast Asia. Everybody came to Burma to study. I went to dinner with somebody, and we were talking, and I kept on having to say, what? I just couldn't understand what they were saying. And I said, by the way, what do you do for a living? And he said, I teach English. And as you see in the movie, the educational system is rote, basically. And the people teaching in the schools, English, don't speak English. Probably the most pressing thing for Burma right now is essentially rebuilding the educational system. I think it's almost more important, than food at this point. Pardon? Yeah, please.
The education system was actually stopped at one point in the 80s where all the schools were stopped. I have cousins and stuff that were on their last year of graduating with masters in computer science and stuff, and they literally had to drop out of school, had nowhere to go, and joined shipping companies, climbing 100-foot poles to make ends meet.
My understanding is that from what my Burmese friends, that at the university, bribery gets you there. Also at the high school, the teachers supposedly teach, but then you have to hire them after school.
I was just there in January. I was there for New Year. And Yangon felt like it was, the only infrastructure there was built by the British. Otherwise, there wasn't infrastructure. So, to what extent they invested, that's what's in the country.
Yeah, but I think it's very limited what they did. There's some buildings in Yangon that are built by the British, but generally if you travel around the country, the British didn't do that much.
And then I remember taking the highway down from like down central to, what is it, Mandalay?
Yes.
Right, from Yangon. What is the story behind the highway exactly? I heard like numerous facts, but that it was financed by the U.S. and like no one's ever on it. It's this like kind of huge piece of infrastructure, but the Burmese kind of don't use it or can't use it because of the tolls.
I can't answer that question, but I know that there's a super highway that goes from Yangon or Rangoon to Naypyidaw, which is the new capital. By the way, the Burmese government took all civil servants and moved them to Naypyidaw, which is sort of the Brasilia of Myanmar. And, you know, people think that's bizarre, but if you look at the history of the kings, what they did is when a new king came, they left the old city and built a new city. And I think the military must be thinking of themselves as sort of the new kings. And the military, you know, if you talk to them, they feel like they're doing the right thing. They're helping the country. You know, they're holding it together. Yeah, question.
What do you think is responsible for the density of linguistic diversity in Burma?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm probably not the guy to answer it, but I mean, you know, there were the original indigenous populations that were, whoops, the map was gone. Anyhow, there was also, you know, essentially, you know, from Tibet, populations came down. There was all this mixing. I don't really know. I'm not a linguist. Yeah, anyhow, I'm afraid to answer that question. I'm always amazed that people speak different languages, right? And children growing up invent their own words. Right? We're hardwired for language somehow.
You've got a pretty interesting audience here at Google and on YouTube who are going to be watching this. So, you know, where do you think we can make the biggest impact? And I'm not talking, you know, like philanthropy or volunteering. I'm talking in terms of how we make and create and, you know, develop our products.
The Burmese are enormously hungry for the outside world. When I was first there, I was one of the few Americans, you know, in the country. And, I want to show you something. Do we have a minute? Where are you from? Here, let me show you something. Apropos this. Okay. Where are you from? Is that
Where am I from?
Well, no, there's one called... Well,
Rural Life Tribes.
Oh, we don't have it.
Don't have it.
Oh. One of the questions that people kept asking me, where are you from? And I would say, well, where do you think I'm from? And they would say, Germany, no. Switzerland, no. Italy, no. And we'll go on. And finally I'd say America. And it was like, oh, from America. And there just were very, very few Americans, you know, in Burma. Of course, this has completely changed. Right. By the way, there are some problems. Tourists are pouring in, you know, faster, essentially, than the country can absorb them. And also aid money is coming in almost too fast to be used. So there is this, and, you know, and all the Western companies are looking at Burma and preparing investments. And so there's this enormous, it's like a cauldron, essentially. It's all just bubbling. And the future is the big mystery. And I think that information is empowerment, as I mentioned, and perhaps, you know, Google can somehow penetrate Burma. Thank you for coming.